My name is Zara Winters, and for 4 grueling years I worked as a night shift janitor at Meridian Technologies while taking online classes, saving every dollar I earned after my parents drained my college fund to finance my sister Vanessa's extravagant vineyard wedding. They assumed I'd just accept their decision and figure something out for my education. They never imagined what would happen when the company's billionaire founder, Harrison Reed, found me solving complex engineering equations on a whiteboard at 3 a.m. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Still here, Winters? Mr. Dalton, the night security supervisor, called out as he passed me mopping the sleek marble floors of Meridian Technologies' main lobby. The massive corporate headquarters gleamed with polished glass and steel even at midnight, the company's distinctive blue and silver logo illuminating the entrance. "Just starting my shift," I replied, adjusting my plain gray uniform with the cleaning service logo embroidered on the pocket. "The executive floor tonight?" "Those bigwigs and their fancy offices," he chuckled, swiping his keycard at the security desk. "More work for you. Those corner offices take twice as long to clean, don't they?" I nodded with a tired smile as I gathered my cleaning cart. "Worth the extra hour, though. Higher floors pay better rates." Mr. Dalton eyed me curiously. "4 years you've been working these night shifts, Zara. Most cleaners burn out after 6 months. What keeps you going?" I shrugged, the weight of my exhaustion momentarily visible before I squared my shoulders. "Just determined, I guess." What I didn't say was that every sparkling floor, every emptied trash can, every cleaned window represented another $14.75 toward the future that had been taken from me. A future I was silently, methodically rebuilding with my own hands. The elevator. Doors closed, carrying me up to the 47th floor where Meridian's executive suites occupied prime Manhattan real estate. As I rode upward, I caught my reflection in the polished doors, dark circles under my eyes, my once vibrant brown skin looking dull under the fluorescent lighting, my naturally curly hair pulled back severely in a practical bun. At 26, I looked closer to 36 after 4 years of night shifts and daytime online engineering classes. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my mother. "Don't forget Vanessa's baby shower on Saturday. 2 p.m. at the Westview Country Club. She really wants you there." I sighed, mentally calculating how little sleep I would get between my Friday night shift and this family obligation. My sister Vanessa's perfect life had consumed our family's attention, for as long as I could remember. Her wedding, her house in the suburbs, and now her first baby. Everything else, including my education, was secondary. The elevator chimed as it reached the executive floor. I pushed my cart into the silent hallway, its wheels squeaking slightly against the premium carpeting. The floor was deserted at this hour, which was exactly how I preferred it. No executives in tailored suits looking through me as if I were invisible. No administrative assistants with pitying glances. Just me, my cleaning supplies, and blessed silence to think. As I worked methodically through each office, my mind wandered back to that day 4 years ago when everything changed. I had just turned 22, graduated summa cum laude with my undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, and had been accepted to the prestigious Westbrook Institute of Technology for their advanced engineering program. What had been my dream since I was 12, taking apart household appliances and reassembling them with improvements that sometimes worked and sometimes led to minor household disasters. My acceptance letter had arrived with a partial scholarship, not enough to cover the steep tuition, but combined with the college fund my grandparents had established before they passed away, I would manage. Or so I thought until that evening when my parents sat me down at our kitchen table. "Zara, we need to discuss your college fund," my father had begun, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. My mother jumped in, her words coming in a rush. "Vanessa and Derek have set their wedding date for this summer. With Derek's parents contributing so little, we're facing some difficult financial decisions. I remember staring at them, confusion giving way to a creeping sense of dread. What does Vanessa's wedding have to do with my college fund? The uncomfortable glance my parents exchanged told me everything before they even spoke. We've had to reallocate your college funds, my father said finally. The venue Vanessa has her heart set on requires a substantial deposit, and with the catering, flowers, and destination events. How much? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Another glance between them. All of it, my mother admitted. All of it. 100% of my future redirected to pay for a single day of celebration for my sister. We'll find a way to help with your tuition later, my father assured me quickly. Maybe not in time for fall semester, but eventually. You can start at community college, save money living at home. What has always been a bit ambitious anyway. Vanessa. Needs this now, my mother added, as if that somehow softened the blow. Her wedding is happening now, college can wait. I nodded mutely, too shocked to argue, too hurt to cry. Later that night, I pulled up the balance of my college fund online, a privilege I'd gained when I turned 21. It was true. The account had been emptied just days earlier. The following week, I deferred my acceptance to WT, found the cheapest apartment I could afford in the city, and took the night janitorial position at Meridian Technologies. The pay was better than retail or food service. The hours allowed me to take online classes during the day, and something about the company's innovative engineering work made me feel at least tangentially connected to the field I loved. My co-workers on the cleaning crew had theories about why someone with my obvious education would choose this job. Some thought I was hiding from an abusive relationship. Others whispered that I must be working off some kind of debt. A few even speculated I was gathering corporate intelligence for a competitor. None of them knew the truth. How could they? I barely acknowledged it to myself. As I finished cleaning the main conference room, I checked my watch. 2:30 a.m. This was my favorite time of night. The security cameras on the executive floor shut down for system maintenance between 2:30 and 3:15 a.m. every Tuesday, a detail I had discovered during my first month. Those 45 minutes had become my secret education. I wheeled my cart toward the eye. Last office at the end of the hall, the largest corner suite belonging to Harrison Reed himself, the reclusive billionaire founder of Meridian Technologies. Unlike the other executives who adorned their walls with photographs of golf outings and charity galas, Reed's office contained something far more valuable: whiteboards filled with engineering schematics for the company's next-generation robotics projects. I slipped inside, locked the door behind me, and pulled out my phone to photograph the latest designs before cleaning them away. But tonight, something was different. The boards had been wiped clean except for a single complex equation with a note scrawled beneath it. Solve this if you can. The night maintenance issue needs similar thinking. My heart raced. The message couldn't be meant for me. Could it? Had. Someone discovered my late-night study sessions? Was this a trap to catch me? I stared at the equation, a complex thermodynamic problem related to cooling systems. I recognized it from my advanced engineering coursework. Despite my anxiety, my mind began working through the variables, identifying the approach needed. Before I could stop myself, I had picked up a marker and begun writing, the solution flowing from my hand as naturally as breathing. 20 minutes later, I stepped back to review my work, satisfied with the elegant solution I'd derived. Then I froze as I heard the electronic click of the office door unlocking behind me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I turned slowly, marker still clutched in my trembling hand, to find myself face to face with Harrison Reed himself. The billionaire CEO of Meridian Technologies didn't match his publicity photos. In person, he was taller than I expected, with silver-streaked dark hair and penetrating eyes that immediately focused on the whiteboard behind me rather than on my janitorial uniform. He wore casual clothes, jeans and a simple black sweater, rather than the tailored suits he donned for rare public appearances. He began, stepping past me to examine my solution, completely ignoring the fact that I was clearly not supposed to be solving equations on his personal whiteboard at 3 a.m. That's actually correct. And you've used a dimensional analysis approach I haven't seen applied to this particular problem before. I remained frozen, unable to formulate a response. My mind raced through potential consequences: termination, legal action for unauthorized access to proprietary information, possibly even criminal charges. "You're from the cleaning crew," he stated rather than asked, finally turning his attention to me. "How long have you been studying my engineering notes?" The direct question broke my paralysis. There was no point in lying. I'd been caught red-handed. 4 years, sir," I admitted, straightening my posture despite my fear. "Only during the security camera maintenance window. I never share anything I see, and I always clean the boards afterward." To my surprise, a slight smile crossed his face. 4 years of janitor by night, engineer by early morning, and the rest of your time?" "Online engineering classes, sir, through Eastlake Community College." He nodded thoughtfully, as if this confirmed some private theory. "And your name?" "Zara Winters." He crossed to his desk and tapped something into his computer. After a moment, he looked up. "BS in Mechanical Engineering from Lanford University. Summa cum laude. Accepted to Westbrook Institute of Technology 4 years ago, but never attended." His eyes found mine again. "Why?" The question was simple, but cut straight to the heart of everything. I hesitated, unwilling to share my family's betrayal with this stranger, no matter how powerful he might be. "Financial constraints," I finally answered, the words coming out clipped and formal. He seemed to sense there was more to the story, but didn't press. Instead, he glanced at his watch, a surprisingly modest timepiece for a man worth billions, and made a decision. "It's 3:10 a.m., Ms. Winters. Your shift ends at 6, correct?" I nodded, still uncertain where this conversation was heading. "Finish cleaning my office as you normally would. Then meet me in conference room 3C at 6:15. We have matters to discuss." He turned toward the door, then paused. "And Ms. Winters, bring your full educational transcript." He left without waiting for a response. The door clicking shut behind him, I stood motionless for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Had I just spoken with Harrison Reed, the Harrison Reed, about engineering approaches and my educational background? Was I hallucinating from exhaustion? The clock on the wall confirmed I had only 5 minutes remaining in my camera-free window. With mechanical efficiency born from years of practice, I photographed the remaining notes on the smaller whiteboards, cleaned everything thoroughly, and completed my routine cleaning tasks. The remaining hours of my shift passed in a blur. My mind kept replaying the encounter, analyzing every word, every expression, trying to predict what awaited me at 6:15. Termination seemed the most likely outcome, perhaps coupled with a non-disclosure agreement. Maybe he was impressed enough to offer me a reference for future employment after letting me go. At 5:55, I returned my cleaning cart to the service area and headed to the employee locker room. I splashed water on my face and stared at my reflection in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and stress had etched fine lines around my mouth that hadn't been there 4 years ago. I looked like what I was, exhausted, worn down, yet still stubbornly holding on to a dream that kept moving further out of reach. From my locker, I retrieved the professional folder I always kept with me, containing my resume, transcripts, and certificates from additional online courses I'd completed. It had become a ritual of sorts, carrying these documents everywhere as a tangible reminder of my true identity beyond the janitorial uniform. At precisely 6:15, I knocked on the door of conference room 3C. "Enter," came the immediate response. I stepped into the room to find Harrison Reed seated at the head of the table, a touchscreen display active before him. He wasn't alone. An elegant woman in her 50s with a sleek silver bob and sharp eyes sat to his right, while a younger man in wire-rimmed glasses occupied the seat to his left. "Ms. Winters, thank you for joining us," Reed said formally. "This is Victoria Hargrove, our Chief Innovation Officer, and Dr. Calvin Way, who leads our thermal engineering division." I nodded stiffly, acutely aware of my worn uniform and disheveled appearance after a full night's work. "Please sit." Reed gestured to the seat directly across from him. As I settled into the chair, I noticed that the display showed the solution I'd written on his whiteboard earlier, alongside what appeared to be testing data. "We've been working on a cooling system issue for our new robotics platform for nearly 3 months, Reed began without preamble. "Dr. Way's team has run computer models with dozens of approaches. None have solved the thermal degradation problem without compromising power efficiency." Dr. Way adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Reed shared your solution with me an hour ago. We've run preliminary simulations based on your approach." He paused, a mix of professional admiration and personal discomfort crossing his face. "The initial results show a 23% improvement in thermal regulation with only a 4% power draw increase. If these numbers hold in physical testing, it would be significant." Victoria Hargrove studied me with keen interest. "Harrison tells me you've been essentially auditing our R&D work for 4 years via our whiteboards. That's unorthodox." I swallowed hard. "I understand it was inappropriate, Ms. Hargrove. I never—" She raised a hand, cutting off my apology. "I'm more interested in what you learned during those 4 years of observation." The question surprised me. I'd expected accusations, not curiosity about my unauthorized education. I've followed the development of the MX-7 robotics platform from concept through the current cooling system challenges, I began hesitantly. I've studied the iterative improvements to the neural processing arrays and the shift from traditional servos to the proprietary microhydraulics system Meridian patented last year. As I spoke, I gradually found my voice, detailing specific engineering evolutions I'd witnessed across dozens of whiteboard sessions. The 3 executives exchanged glances as I continued, but I couldn't read their expressions. When I finally fell silent, Reed leaned forward. "May I see your transcripts?" I handed over my folder, which he opened and spread across the table. Victoria and Dr. Way leaned in to examine the documents. "Perfect GPA in your undergraduate work," Victoria noted. "And you've maintained a 4.0 in your online courses while working full-time?" I nodded, unsure if this academic inquisition was leading to punishment or something else entirely. Reed was reviewing my resume. 4 years as a night janitor here. Day shifts at Riverdale Care Center on weekends. Online engineering program. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "When do you sleep, Ms. Winters?" The question caught me off guard with its unexpected concern. "I average about 5 hours, sir. 6 on good days." "For 4 years?" Dr. Way asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "I'm highly motivated," I replied. Reed gathered the documents and returned them to the folder. "You were accepted to Westbrook Institute of Technology 4 years ago. It's one of the top 3 engineering programs in the country. What happened?" The direct question hung in the air between us. This time, surrounded by these 3 powerful figures in a sunlit conference room so far removed from my nocturnal existence, I felt compelled to answer honestly. "My parents redirected my college fund to pay for my sister's wedding," I said, the words tasting bitter despite the years that had passed. The vineyard venue, the destination bachelor and bachelorette parties, the designer dress, apparently it all cost exactly what my grandparents had saved for my education. I hadn't intended to reveal so much, but once I started, the story spilled out with surprising emotional force. When I explained that I'd lose my spot at WET, they suggested community college was more realistic anyway. They said my sister's wedding was happening now, while education could wait. My hands had curled into fists on my lap. I consciously relaxed them. So I deferred my acceptance, found the night position here, and started rebuilding on my own. The room fell silent. Victoria Hargrove's expression had softened slightly, while Dr. Way looked distinctly uncomfortable. Reed's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. "And in 4 years, how much have you managed to save toward WIT?" he asked. $62,347, I answered promptly. The exact figure was permanently etched in my mind, updated with each deposit. "My goal is $150,000 by next fall. That would cover tuition and minimal living expenses for the 2-year master's program, if my reapplication is accepted." Reed nodded, once, then stood abruptly. "Thank you for your time this morning, Ms. Winters. We won't keep you any longer. You must be exhausted after your shift." The sudden dismissal felt like a physical blow. Whatever I had expected from this meeting. Termination. Reprimand, perhaps even some minor recognition, this anticlimactic conclusion wasn't it. "So, should I report for my shift tonight as usual?" I asked, struggling to keep disappointment from my voice as I rose from my chair. Reed exchanged glances with his colleagues before answering. "We'll be in touch before then, Ms. Winters. Victoria will have my assistant contact you." I nodded stiffly, gathered my folder, and left the conference room with as much dignity as I could muster in my rumpled uniform. As the door closed behind me, I heard Dr. Way's voice. "She solved in 20 minutes what my entire team couldn't crack in 3 months. Their voices faded as I walked toward the elevator, uncertainty churning in my stomach. Had I just ended my career at Meridian, or opened a new door? Either way, I had exposed my secret nighttime education. There was no going back to the comfortable anonymity of the cleaning crew. The subway ride to my apartment in Grayson Heights felt longer than usual that morning. I sat with my folder clutched to my chest, replaying the meeting in my mind, analyzing every word and expression from Harrison Reed and his executives. The initial excitement of being recognized for my solution had faded, replaced by gnawing anxiety about my future. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Don't forget to RSVP for Vanessa's baby shower. Need your answer today." I sighed and slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding. The contrast between my family's ongoing expectations and the precarious situation I now faced was too much to process on 5 hours of sleep. My apartment was a 400-square-foot studio in a rundown building with unreliable heat but mercifully low rent. I'd chosen it for its proximity to both subway lines I needed, one for Meridian Technologies, the other for my weekend shifts at Riverdale Care Center where I served meals to elderly residents. The space was sparse but meticulously organized, with a small desk dominating the main area, covered with textbooks and engineering journals salvaged from sidewalk giveaways and library sales. I hung up my uniform, showered quickly, and collapsed onto my narrow bed, setting my alarm for 2 p.m. 6 hours of sleep felt like an unimaginable luxury after years of making do with 5 or less. I drifted off, wondering if I still had a job to wake up for. The insistent buzz of my phone jolted me awake. The screen showed 11:37 a.m., nearly 3 hours before my alarm. The caller ID displayed unknown. "Hello?" I answered groggily. "Ms. Winters? This is Elise Chen, Mr. Reed's executive assistant." The voice was polished and efficient. "Mr. Reed would like to meet with you at 1 p.m. today. A car will pick you up at 12:30 from your residence." I sat up, instantly alert. "Today? I'm scheduled to work tonight." "Your shift has been covered," she interrupted smoothly. "Mr. Reed has also arranged for you to have today and tomorrow off from your position at Riverdale Care Center." My mind raced. How did Reed know about my weekend job? I hadn't listed Riverdale on my resume. I kept the positions separate to avoid employers knowing I worked 7 days a week. May I ask what this meeting is regarding? I managed. Mr. Reed prefers to discuss that in person, Elise replied. The car will arrive at 12:30. Business casual attire is appropriate. She disconnected before I could ask anything else. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Harrison Reed had arranged for my shifts to be covered and was sending a car to my apartment. Whatever was happening, it was far beyond a standard termination. With less than an hour to prepare, I scrambled into action. My business casual options were limited to a single navy blazer, 2 button-up shirts, and black pants I kept for job interviews. I dressed quickly, applied minimal makeup to disguise my exhaustion, and attempted to tame my curly hair into a professional-looking bun. At precisely 12:30, my phone buzzed with a text. Your car has arrived. Outside my building waited a sleek, black sedan with tinted windows, instantly out of place in my neighborhood. The driver, a woman in a tailored uniform, opened the door as I approached. Ms. Winters? I'm Diane. I'll be taking you to Mr. Reed's residence. His residence? I echoed, surprised. Not Meridian's offices? Mr. Reed's instructions were clear. She replied with professional detachment. Please, make yourself comfortable. The car's interior was luxurious. Soft leather seats, climate control, even a small refrigerator stocked with water and juices. As we pulled away from my apartment building, I noticed several of my neighbors watching curiously from windows and stoops. In my 4 years living there, I'd never been picked up in anything more impressive than a rideshare economy car. We drove north out of the city, leaving behind crowded streets for increasingly exclusive suburbs. After nearly 40 minutes, we turned onto a private road marked only by an understated sign reading, Oak Ridge. The road wound through meticulously landscaped grounds before revealing a modern glass and stone residence nestled into a hillside. Unlike the ostentatious mansions of many billionaires, Reed's home was architecturally striking but relatively modest in scale, emphasizing integration with the natural surroundings rather than dominating them. Diane pulled up to the entrance. Ms. Chen will meet you inside, she said, opening my door. I stepped out, smoothing my blazer nervously. Before I could even approach the entrance, the door opened to reveal the same elegant woman I'd met earlier, Elise Chen. Ms. Winters, thank you for coming on such short notice, she greeted me. Mr. Reed is waiting for you in his study. She led me through the house, which continued the theme of understated luxury. Open spaces filled with natural light, minimal but clearly expensive furnishings, and occasional pieces of what appeared to be museum-quality art. No family photos adorned the walls, I noticed. No evidence of children or partners or celebrations. Mr. Reed rarely brings business associates to his home, Elise commented as we walked, but he felt this conversation would be better conducted outside the corporate environment. Before I could ask what that meant, we arrived at a set of double doors. Elise knocked once, then opened them without waiting for a response. Ms. Winters has arrived, sir. The study was a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a wooded ravine. One entire wall was covered with bookshelves, while another featured several framed patents. At the center stood a large desk where Harrison Reed sat reviewing documents. Thank you, Elise, he said, rising as we entered. Please bring in the lunch service in 15 minutes. Elise nodded and departed, closing the doors behind her. Reed gestured to a seating area near the windows. Please, Ms. Winters, make yourself comfortable. I perched on the edge of a leather armchair, acutely aware of how out of place I felt in this environment, so far removed from both my cramped apartment and the corporate offices I cleaned each night. Reed took the seat across from me. In daylight, I could see the fatigue lines around his eyes that weren't visible in his carefully managed public photos. Up close, he looked older than his reported 58 years. I imagine you have questions about why you're here, he began. Several, sir, I admitted. A hint of a smile crossed his face. Let's start with the most immediate. You're not being terminated from Meridian Technologies. Relief washed over me, though it was quickly replaced by new confusion. Thank you. But then, after our meeting this morning, Dr. Wei's team ran comprehensive simulations on your cooling system solution, Reed continued. The results exceeded even their initial projections. Your approach will save us approximately 9 months of R&D time and millions in development costs. I nodded, not sure how to respond to this information. That alone would warrant recognition. Reed said, but I'm more interested in the circumstances that led to you cleaning offices at night while pursuing engineering education by day. He leaned forward slightly. You said your parents redirected your college fund to pay for your sister's wedding. May I ask how much was in that fund? The question felt intrusive, but after the events of the morning, I saw little point in evasion. $94,000. I answered. My grandparents established it when I was born and contributed to it every year until they passed away when I was 16. And your parents used all of it for the wedding, without your consent? I shifted uncomfortably. They were the trustees until I turned 25. Legally, they had the right to reallocate the funds. Legal rights and moral obligations are often different matters, Reed observed, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. Your response to this situation intrigues me. Many young people would have given up on their education, or taken on crushing student loan debt, or perhaps sued their parents. You chose a different path. He gestured to a folder on the table between us. My folder, the one I'd brought to our morning meeting. You've maintained a perfect GPA while working 70 hours a week across 2 jobs. You've saved over $62,000 toward your goal. And somehow, you found time to teach yourself enough about Meridian's engineering projects to solve a problem that stumped our best team. The way he laid out my accomplishments made them sound more impressive than they felt from the inside, where each day had been merely a matter of putting one foot in front of the other, staying awake through one more class, cleaning one more office. Why am I here, Mr. Reed? I asked directly. He studied me for a moment before answering. Because I see something of myself in you, Ms. Winters. Not the circumstances. Mine were quite different. But the response to adversity. Reed stood and walked to his desk, returning with what appeared to be a legal document. Meridian Technologies would like to offer you a position, not as a janitor, but as a special projects engineer reporting directly to Dr. Wei's thermal engineering division. My heart skipped a beat. But I don't have my master's degree. I haven't even your practical knowledge and problem solving. Abilities have already proven more valuable than many candidates with advanced degrees, Reed interrupted. The position includes a starting salary of $115,000 plus benefits and a flexible schedule that would allow you to complete your education at WIT while working for us. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. The salary he mentioned was nearly 5 times what I earned between both my current jobs combined. There's more, Reed continued, pushing the document toward me. In recognition of the value your cooling system solution provides to Meridian, the company is offering you a one-time innovation bonus of $150,000, precisely the amount you indicated you need to complete your master's program at WIT. I looked down at the document, then back at Reed, suspicion suddenly flaring. Why would you do this? You don't know me. I know enough, he replied calmly. I know you're brilliant, disciplined, and resourceful. I know you solved a problem that has cost my company months of delay and millions in expenses. And I know talent when I see it, Ms. Winters. He paused, then added more quietly, I also know what it's like to have your potential dismissed by those who should have nurtured it. Before I could respond, a knock at the door announced Elise with a lunch service. She arranged a selection of sandwiches and salads on the table between us, then departed silently. Reed's expression shifted, becoming less formal. Please, eat something. You've been awake most of the night, and we have much more to discuss. As I hesitantly served myself a small portion of salad, Reed continued, There's one more element to my proposal, Ms. Winters. Something more personal than professional. I paused, fork midway to my mouth. I've spent 40 years building Meridian Technologies, he said. I've created innovative products, employed thousands, and amassed more wealth than I could spend in several lifetimes. What I haven't done is establish a legacy beyond the corporate entity. He gestured to the room around us. I have no children, Ms. Winters. No family to whom I can pass my knowledge, my experience, or eventually, my considerable resources. A chill ran through me as I began to understand where this conversation was heading. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Reed? I asked carefully. Mentorship to begin with, he replied. The kind of guidance and support I wish I'd had at your age, and eventually, perhaps, something more formal. But that would depend on how we work together over time. He must have read the wariness in my expression because he added, I'm not asking for any decisions today beyond whether you'll accept the engineering position and scholarship funds. The rest can develop, or not, based on how compatible we find our professional and personal values to be. I sat back in my chair, mind racing. The opportunity was extraordinary, life-changing in every sense. Yet the speed and scale of it triggered every cautionary instinct I possessed. This is overwhelming, I admitted. Yesterday I was cleaning offices and worrying about making rent. Today you're offering me a 6-figure job and hinting at making me some kind of professional heir? Reed nodded, acknowledging the abruptness. Take the weekend to consider the employment offer. The funds for your education will be transferred regardless of your decision. That's payment for the cooling system solution, not contingent on anything else. Why? I asked again, the simplicity of the question carrying the weight of my confusion. Why me? For the first time, Harrison Reed's carefully composed expression faltered, revealing something vulnerable beneath. Because 35 years ago, I was also working nights while trying to complete my education after family circumstances derailed my original plans, he said quietly. The difference was, someone saw my potential and gave me the opportunity to realize it. I'm simply paying that forward, Ms. Winters. He rose, signaling that our formal discussion had concluded. Elise will provide you with the necessary documents to review. The car will take you home whenever you're ready. And, Ms. Winters? Yes? Whatever you decide about the position at Meridian, I hope you'll accept the educational funds. Talent like yours shouldn't be cleaning floors at night. I returned to my apartment in a daze, a leather portfolio from Elise Chen tucked under my arm containing employment contracts, confidentiality agreements, and transfer paperwork for the $150,000 educational fund. The ride back had been silent, my mind too overwhelmed to form coherent thoughts as the landscape transitioned from Harrison Reed's exclusive neighborhood back to my working-class reality. My tiny apartment seemed even shabbier than usual after the elegant spaces I'd just left. The sagging futon, the desk assembled from milk crates and a salvaged door, the kitchenette with its flickering light and temperamental hot plate, all evidence of the compromises I'd made to save every possible dollar. I placed the portfolio on my desk and sank onto the futon, finally allowing the emotions I'd carefully controlled to surface. Tears came without warning, not of sadness or joy specifically, but from the sheer release of tension I'd carried for 4 years. Every night shift, every missed family event, every moment of exhaustion had been leading toward a goal that suddenly seemed within reach through means I never could have anticipated. When the emotional wave subsided, I opened the portfolio and began reading the documents methodically. The employment contract was straightforward but generous. $115,000 base salary, comprehensive benefits including health insurance I hadn't been able to afford for years, stock options vesting over 5 years, and most importantly, a schedule. Flexible enough to accommodate classes at WIT. The educational fund transfer required only my signature and banking information, with no conditions attached. As Reed had promised, the money was mine, regardless of whether I accepted the position at Meridian. My phone buzzed with another text from my mother. "Need your RSVP for the shower today, Zara?" Vanessa is asking. I stared at the message, feeling suddenly distant from the family dynamics that had dominated my life for so long. With Reed's offer in front of me, my sister's baby shower seemed almost comically trivial. Yet the years of ingrained responsibility tugged at me. "I'll be there," I texted back. Sorry for the delay in responding. Her reply came immediately. "Wonderful. Vanessa will be so happy. Wear something nice. Vanessa's in-laws will be attending." The instruction to wear something nice might have irritated me yesterday. Today, it barely registered. My mind was already calculating how to use this family gathering to my advantage. For 4 years, I had kept my true circumstances from my family, allowing them to believe I had found another path after the college fund reallocation. They knew I worked at Meridian, but I had deliberately kept the details vague, letting them assume I had an entry-level office position rather than revealing I cleaned those offices after hours. Now, with Reed's offer potentially transforming my life, I needed to decide how much to share and how to share it. I spent the remainder of the day researching Harrison Reed, seeking any information that might help me evaluate his unexpected proposal. The public record painted a picture consistent with what I'd observed. A brilliant engineer who had built Meridian Technologies from a small startup into a global leader in robotics and automation. A private man who rarely gave interviews and avoided the flamboyant lifestyle of many tech billionaires. A generous philanthropist focusing primarily on educational initiatives for disadvantaged students. What I couldn't find was any hint of controversy or scandal that might explain his interest in mentoring me specifically. No failed relationships with estranged children, no succession disputes with relatives, nothing that suggested he needed a replacement heir for complicated personal reasons. By evening, I had reached a tentative decision. I would accept the educational funds, that much was clear. The engineering position was more complex, but ultimately too extraordinary to decline. As for Reed's hint at a potential mentorship evolving into something more formal, that I would evaluate over time, maintaining professional boundaries until I better understood his true intentions. I slept deeply that night, uninterrupted by alarm clocks for the first time in years. When I woke naturally the following morning, sunshine streaming through my single window, I felt a clarity that had been missing during yesterday's emotional tumult. I signed the educational fund transfer documents and emailed scans to Elise Chen, as instructed. Within hours, I received confirmation that the transfer had been initiated and would be completed by Monday. Just like that, the financial goal I had been struggling toward for 4 years was accomplished through an improbable encounter with a billionaire who had noticed me solving an equation on his whiteboard. The weekend passed in a blur of practical tasks. I drafted my acceptance letter for the engineering position, updated my resume, and prepared a formal reapplication to WIT for the spring semester. When Saturday arrived, I put on my single nice outfit, a navy blue dress I'd purchased secondhand, for job interviews, and headed to the upscale country club hosting my sister's baby shower. The Westview Country Club exuded the kind of casual affluence my sister Vanessa had always aspired to. Manicured lawns, understated luxury, membership, limited to families who rarely discussed actual dollar amounts, but always knew exactly where everyone stood financially. The event space for the shower had been decorated in lavish pastels with custom floral arrangements and personalized favors for each guest. I arrived exactly on time, neither early enough to get trapped into helping with last-minute arrangements, nor late enough to draw attention. My mother spotted me immediately. "Zara, there you are." She air-kissed near my cheek, careful not to disturb her immaculate makeup. "Vanessa was worried you might not make it. You look nice." The slight pause conveyed her assessment of my attire as adequate but unremarkable. "Congratulations on becoming a grandmother soon," I replied with practiced pleasantness, having long ago learned that focusing on her new status was the most reliable way to direct conversations away from my circumstances. Isn't it exciting? The first grandchild, she beamed, predictably distracted. Come say hello to Vanessa. She's absolutely glowing. My sister held court in a plush chair decorated with ribbons and flowers, a mock throne for the guest of honor. At 7 months pregnant, Vanessa had the polished look of someone for whom even pregnancy was an aesthetic achievement. Designer maternity wear, professional blowout, the perfect balance of radiance and delicate vulnerability. You made it, she said as I approached, her tone suggesting she had indeed doubted I would attend. No work today? I took the day off, I replied, bending to hug her awkwardly around her baby bump. You look beautiful, Van. Her expression softened. Despite our complicated history, moments of genuine sisterly affection occasionally broke through. Thanks for coming. I know these events aren't really your thing. I wouldn't miss it, I said, and meant it. Whatever resentment I harbored about the college fund, it didn't extend to her unborn child. How are you feeling? As Vanessa launched into detailed descriptions of her pregnancy experience, I noticed my father entering from the terrace, deep in conversation with Derek's father, a retired investment banker whose connections had helped secure my brother-in-law's position at a prestigious financial firm. My father caught my eye and nodded, excusing himself to approach us. Zara, he greeted me with a brief hug. Good to see you. Your mother said you might be too busy with work to attend. I rearranged my schedule, I replied. Actually, Dad, when things quiet down later, I'd like to speak with you and Mom about something important. A flicker of concern crossed his face. Everything all right? You're not in any kind of trouble, are you? The question revealed what he assumed might prompt me to request a family conversation. Financial difficulties, legal issues, health problems. The possibility that I might have good news to share clearly hadn't occurred to him. Nothing like that, I assured him, just some developments I'd like to discuss privately. He seemed relieved. We'll find a moment after the gift opening. Your mother asked me to tell you that Vanessa's in-laws have been asking about you. Apparently, they're impressed that you work at Meridian Technologies. Derek's father knows someone on their board. I nodded noncommittally. Of course, my parents would emphasize my connection to a prestigious company while conveniently omitting my actual role there. Image management had always been their priority. The shower proceeded with the expected rituals, elaborate games involving baby items, an excessive gift-opening ceremony, a gourmet luncheon with multiple courses. I participated with automatic politeness, my mind frequently drifting to the signed documents in my apartment and the new life they represented. Earth to Zara, Vanessa's voice pulled me back to the present. You're 1,000,000 miles away. Come help me with this big one from Mom and Dad. I moved to assist her with unwrapping an enormous box containing an extravagant custom-made crib that cost more than 3 months of my rent. My mother beamed as Vanessa exclaimed over the hand-painted details and imported European mattress. Only the best for our first grandchild, my father announced proudly. We ordered it 6 months ago to ensure it would arrive in time, I maintained. My pleasant expression, but the irony wasn't lost on me. The same parents who had deemed my education an unnecessary expense had spared no cost for their grandchild's sleeping arrangements. As the event wound down and guests began departing, my mother approached me. Your father mentioned you wanted to speak with us? Yes, if you have a few minutes before you need to leave. She glanced around. The staff will handle the cleanup. We can use the small sitting room down the hall. I followed my parents to a quietly elegant room designed for private conversations. My father closed the door behind us and turned expectantly. So, what's this about, Zara? Your father said you have some news? I took a deep breath, suddenly uncertain about how much to reveal. The most satisfying approach would be to lay out every detail. The night shifts they didn't know about, the years of sacrifice, Reed's recognition of my talents. Yet something held me back from full disclosure. Perhaps it was self-protection, or perhaps a recognition that such revelation might bring momentary satisfaction, but ultimately change nothing fundamental about our relationship. "I've been offered a new position at Meridian Technologies," I began, choosing my words carefully. "A significant promotion that includes funding for me to complete my master's degree at Westbrook Institute of Technology." My mother's expression, registered surprise, followed quickly by calculation, assessing how this information affected the family narrative she maintained. "That's wonderful, dear," she said. "Always knew you had potential in— What is it you do at Meridian again?" "Engineering," I supplied. "I'll be working directly with their thermal engineering division on advanced robotics projects." My father leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued by the prestige factor. "That sounds impressive. What prompted this sudden promotion?" I allowed myself a small smile. "I solved a technical problem that had been challenging their team for months. The CEO personally offered me the position." "The CEO?" My father's eyebrows rose. "Harrison Reed himself? I didn't realize you had that kind of access." "It was an unexpected opportunity," I said, understating the circumstances dramatically. "The position comes with a substantial salary increase and flexible hours that will allow me to attend WIT starting next semester." "Wit?" My mother frowned slightly. "But I thought you'd moved on from that idea years ago. Surely at your age, with a good corporate position, more schooling isn't necessary." And there it was, the familiar dismissal of my educational aspirations, packaged as practical concern. "The master's program is essential for advancing in my field," I replied evenly. "And the timing is finally right, now that I have both the financial resources and employer support." My father studied me with newfound interest. "This sounds like quite an opportunity, Zara. We should celebrate. Perhaps dinner next weekend? You could tell us more about the projects you'll be working on." The invitation was genuine, I recognized. My father had always respected career achievement, even if he had been unwilling to invest in mine. Now that I had attained a position that reflected well on the family, I was worth including. "That would be nice," I said, knowing I would tell them only the carefully edited version of my advancement, the publicly presentable narrative that omitted the years of night shifts, the whiteboard revelations, Reed's private mentorship offer. Some truths were mine alone. Monday morning arrived with a notification from my bank that required several reads to fully comprehend. $150,000 has been deposited into your account. The sum represented more money than I had ever possessed at one time, more than I earned in 5 years of my combined jobs. I stared at the notification, the reality of Harrison Reed's offer finally concrete. With trembling fingers, I composed my formal acceptance of the engineering position and sent it to Elise Chen. Her response came within minutes, confirming my start date the following Monday and requesting my presence at Meridian headquarters on Wednesday for orientation and paperwork processing. I spent the day in a productive frenzy, submitting my reapplication to WIT and attaching documentation of my newfound financial capability. I then drafted resignation letters for both Riverdale Care Center and the cleaning service that contracted me to Meridian. While the cleaning service position had been merely a means to an end, I felt genuine regret about leaving my weekend shifts at Riverdale. The elderly residents had become familiar faces over the years, some even asking for me specifically during mealtimes. By afternoon, the practical arrangements completed, a strange restlessness came over me. For 4 years, every minute had been allocated to working, studying, or the minimal sleep necessary to maintain both. Now, with a week of unexpected freedom before starting my new position, I felt almost disoriented by the absence of immediate pressure. My phone rang, an unusual occurrence, as few people ever called rather than texted. The screen displayed Harrison. "Reed? Mr. Reed," I answered, trying to sound professional despite my surprise. Ms. Winters. His voice was as composed as it had been during our meeting. I received your acceptance of the position. Dr. Wei is quite eager to have you join his team. I'm looking forward to it, I replied, unsure what else to say. I was wondering if you might be available for dinner this evening. There are several aspects of your role I'd like to discuss before you begin formal orientation. The invitation caught me off guard. Dinner? Of course, if that would be helpful. Excellent. Elise will text you the details. Until this evening, then. He disconnected before I could ask any of the questions forming in my mind. Seconds later, my phone chimed with a text from Elise Chen. Car will collect you at 7 p.m. Dinner. At Lucian's. Business attire. A quick internet search revealed that Lucian's was among the most exclusive restaurants in the city. A place where reservations were typically booked months in advance, unless one happened to be a billionaire, apparently. Assessed my limited wardrobe with fresh concern. My interview outfit and the navy dress from the baby shower were hardly appropriate for fine dining with a CEO. For the first time in years, I found myself facing a problem that could be solved with money rather than time or effort. 3 hours. And a significant portion of my first paycheck later, I stood in my apartment wearing a simple but elegant black dress with subtle architectural details that the boutique saleswoman assured me was timeless business evening wear. The purchase had been simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying, spending more on a single item of clothing than I had allowed myself for an entire year's wardrobe. At precisely 7 p.m., a text announced my car's arrival. The same driver from Saturday, Diane, greeted me with professional courtesy as she opened the door. Good evening, Ms. Winters. We'll be at Lucian's in approximately 20 minutes. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a historic building downtown, its understated entrance marked only by a small bronze plaque. A host greeted me immediately. Ms. Winters, Mr. Reed is expecting you. Please, follow me. We bypassed the main dining room for a private area where Harrison Reed sat at a table positioned to overlook the city lights. He rose as I approached. Ms. Winters, thank you for joining me on such short notice. Thank you for the invitation, I replied, taking the seat a server pulled out for me. Reed wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that managed to convey authority without ostentation. Like his home, an example of wealth expressed through quality, rather than showiness. I hope you don't mind that I've taken the liberty of ordering for us, he said as the server poured water. Chef Marceau prepares a tasting menu that showcases the best seasonal ingredients. I nodded, relieved to avoid, navigating an unfamiliar menu at unfamiliar prices. That sounds perfect. Reed studied me for a moment. You seem more at ease than during our previous meetings. Having $150,000 unexpectedly appear in one's bank account tends to reduce certain anxieties, I admitted with a small smile. While creating others, I imagine, he observed shrewdly. Sudden changes in circumstance require adjustment, even when those changes are positive. The first course arrived, a delicate composition of ingredients I couldn't fully identify but which tasted more complex and nuanced than anything I'd eaten in years of budget meals. I asked you here this evening to discuss aspects of your position that extend beyond what's outlined in the formal contract, Reed said after I'd had a moment to appreciate the food. As I mentioned during our meeting at my home, I see potential in you that goes beyond solving a single engineering problem. I set down my fork, giving him my full attention. You mentioned mentorship. Yes, but with specific parameters. Reed's expression turned serious. I've spent 40 years building Meridian Technologies from a concept sketched on a restaurant napkin into a global leader in robotics and automation. In that time, I've learned that technical innovation alone isn't sufficient for success. One must also understand organizational dynamics, strategic positioning, financial structures, and perhaps most importantly, people. He paused as the server removed our first course and presented the second, a seafood preparation with an aromatic sauce. What I'm proposing, Reed continued once we were alone again, is a comprehensive development program alongside your formal engineering role. You would have regular sessions with me and with leaders across different divisions of Meridian. You would be included in strategic planning meetings normally restricted to executive level. You would, in essence, receive the kind of education that business schools promise but rarely deliver. I considered this carefully. That sounds extraordinarily valuable, but also time-intensive. I'm concerned about balancing these additional responsibilities with my master's program at WIT. Reed nodded approvingly, as if my question confirmed something. A valid concern. The development program would be structured to complement rather than compete with your academic studies. Approximately 10 hours weekly, primarily consisting of meetings you would attend with me or sessions scheduled during your regular workday. May I ask why you're offering this? I said directly. You mentioned seeing potential in me, but surely there are many talented engineers at Meridian who would benefit from such mentorship. Indeed there are, Reed acknowledged, but few with your particular combination of analytical brilliance and personal resilience. Fewer still who would choose to work night shifts, cleaning offices for 4 years, rather than abandon their goals when faced with obstacles. He regarded me thoughtfully. Success in business, especially at the highest levels, requires more than intelligence or technical skill. It demands persistence, adaptability, and a certain hunger. You've demonstrated all these qualities under circumstances that would have defeated most people. The server presented our third course, something involving rare beef and truffles that would have represented a month's grocery budget in my previous life. There's another factor, Reed continued, after the server withdrew, one I haven't discussed publicly, but which has become increasingly relevant as I enter my 6th decade. He hesitated, seeming to choose his words with particular care. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with a rare form of early-onset Parkinson's disease. The revelation stunned me. Reed showed no obvious symptoms. His movements were precise, his hands steady as he lifted his wine glass. It's progressing slowly, he said, correctly reading my assessment. Current treatments are managing the symptoms effectively. However, the diagnosis forced me to consider Meridian's future more concretely than I had previously. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely moved by his disclosure. That must have been difficult news to receive. It was clarifying, he replied. It compelled me to acknowledge that I had built a company without building a succession plan. My focus on technological innovation left little room for identifying and developing the next generation of leadership. The implications of his statement hung in the air between us. I took a sip of water, buying time to process what he seemed to be suggesting. Mr. Reed, are you grooming me as a potential successor at Meridian Technologies? His expression remained impassive. I'm offering you the opportunity to develop the skills that would make such consideration possible in the future. Whether that potential is realized depends entirely on your performance over the coming years. Years, I repeated. So this is a long-term proposition. Building anything worthwhile requires time, he said simply. I don't expect or need immediate commitments beyond your acceptance of the engineering position and the development program. The rest will evolve naturally, or not, based on compatibility and your demonstrated capabilities. I considered his words carefully. And if I accept this development program, what expectations would you have of me? Dedication, discretion about both my health condition and the nature of our mentorship, willingness to challenge conventional thinking while respecting established wisdom, and perhaps most importantly, intellectual honesty, the courage to acknowledge mistakes and limitations rather than concealing them. The remainder of dinner proceeded with conversation shifting to less consequential topics. My upcoming studies at WIT, Reed's thoughts on emerging technologies in our field, observations about the architectural history of the building we occupied. Throughout, I found myself studying him with new awareness, searching for signs of the condition he had disclosed. Occasionally, I noticed a slight rigidity in his left arm, a barely perceptible delay in movement that would have been undetectable had I not been specifically looking for it. As dessert was served, an artful composition involving caramelized elements and gold leaf, Reed returned to the central question. "I don't expect an immediate answer about the development program," he said. "Take time to consider it, particularly after you've begun the engineering position and can better assess the organizational culture at Meridian." "I appreciate that," I replied, "though I'm already inclined to accept. The opportunity is unprecedented." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "I'm pleased to hear it. Potential is a terrible thing to waste, Ms. Winters. I've spent my career trying to recognize it in technologies. I find it equally important to recognize it in people." When dinner concluded, Reed insisted on having his driver take me home despite my protest that I could easily take a rideshare. "Consider it a practical demonstration of one of my business principles," he said as we exited the restaurant. "Efficiency should never compromise security." Outside my apartment building, I turned to thank him again for the evening. "One last thing, Ms. Winters," Reed said before I could exit the car. "I'm curious. Have you told your family about your new position?" "A simplified version," I admitted. "They know I've been promoted and received educational funding, but not the full circumstances." He nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting choice. May I ask why?" I considered the question. "Some experiences are too personal to share, especially with those who've demonstrated they don't fully value your aspirations." "A wise assessment," Reed said. "I look forward to working with you, Ms. Winters. I think we'll accomplish remarkable things together." As the car pulled away, I stood for a moment looking up at my shabby apartment building, acutely aware that I was standing at a crossroads between my past and a future I could never have imagined just 1 week earlier. The weight of Reed's mentorship, offer with its implicit suggestion of eventual succession, felt simultaneously exhilarating and daunting. Inside my apartment, I opened my laptop and began researching everything available about Reed's condition, its progression, and what it might mean for someone in his position. The articles painted a complex picture. Early onset Parkinson's varied widely in its timeline and severity. With proper treatment, many patients maintained high functionality for years or even decades. Others progressed more rapidly to significant disability. The uncertainty underscored what Reed himself had emphasized. This was a long-term proposition with no guaranteed outcome. He was offering opportunity and mentorship, not promises. As I finally prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father and I have made dinner reservations for Saturday to celebrate your promotion. Derek's father is joining us. He'd like to hear more about Meridian Technologies. Wear something impressive." I smiled faintly at the typical emphasis on appearances and connections. Some things never changed, but I had changed, more than my family realized, and perhaps more than I had fully acknowledged myself. With Harrison Reed's unexpected entry into my life, the balance of power had shifted, not just financially, but fundamentally. For the first time since that devastating conversation 4 years ago when my parents redirected my college fund, I felt not just self-sufficient, but potentially powerful. The question now was how to use that emerging power, and what kind of person I would choose to become with it. The following days blurred together in a whirlwind of transition. Wednesday's orientation at Meridian Technologies introduced me to the corporate side of the company I had previously experienced only during silent night shifts. I signed employment documents, received security clearances several levels higher than my janitorial access, and toured the research facilities where I would soon be working. Dr. Wei, the thermal engineering director who had initially seemed uncomfortable with my unorthodox path to his team, now greeted me with genuine enthusiasm, as he showed me the lab where my cooling system solution was already being implemented in prototype robotics. "We've refined your initial concept with promising results," he explained, displaying diagnostic readings on a large monitor. "The efficiency improvements are actually exceeding our projections." I examined the data, noting several modifications to my original approach. "You've adjusted the microchannel configuration to increase surface area." He nodded, appearing pleased by my immediate comprehension. "Yes, though we maintained your fundamental architecture. The team is quite eager to work with you directly. Your perspective differs from our traditional approaches." What went unspoken but hung clearly in the air was the recognition that my perspective stemmed directly from my unusual background. The practical problem-solving developed through years of working with limited resources rather than the theoretical foundation most engineers brought to the team. By Thursday, I had received confirmation of my acceptance to WET's spring semester. The admissions director had personally called, her tone conveying barely concealed surprise at my suddenly materialized financial resources and Meridian Technologies' formal sponsorship. My class schedule would begin in January, perfectly timed, with my transition to the engineering position. Throughout this period, I noticed subtle but unmistakable changes in how I moved through the world. Sales associates who might have dismissed me weeks earlier now responded to my quiet confidence. Administrative staff at WIT who had previously been perfunctory became attentive when I mentioned my connection to Meridian Technologies. Even my posture had changed, the perpetual hunched tension of exhaustion gradually yielding to a straighter spine and lifted chin. Saturday evening arrived with unexpected nervousness as I prepared for dinner with my parents. I selected a sleek charcoal pantsuit purchased during the same shopping expedition as the black dress, paired with the single-quality accessory I'd owned before my financial transformation, a silver pendant my grandparents had given me when I graduated high school. My father had chosen an upscale steakhouse for the celebration, the kind of establishment where the menu listed no prices and the wine list required its own leather-bound volume. As I approached their table, I noted that both my parents had dressed for the occasion. My father in a tailored suit I hadn't seen before, my mother wearing a designer dress and the pearl necklace reserved for significant events. Derek's father, Martin Calloway, rose as I approached, extending his hand with the practiced cordiality of someone accustomed to business networking. "Zara, good to see you again. Richard has been telling me about your exciting news at Meridian Technologies." My father beamed, clearly pleased to have secured this connection for the family dinner. "Zara will be working directly with their thermal engineering division," he announced, the pride in his voice unmarred by any acknowledgement that he had actively impeded the education that made this position possible. "Fascinating company," Martin commented as we took our seats. "I serve on a board with one of their directors, cutting-edge work in robotics and AI." I nodded politely. "The innovation cycle there is impressive. They're currently developing applications that most competitors haven't even conceptualized yet." "And you're involved with their cooling systems," Richard mentioned? Martin continued, his interest seemingly genuine rather than merely polite. "Yes, thermal regulation for next-generation robotics platforms." I kept my explanation deliberately general, conscious of confidentiality requirements. "Derek works with several investment funds that have positions in Meridian," Martin noted, "always looking for insights into their development pipeline." My mother interjected, "Zara will have to be careful what she shares, of course. Corporate secrets and all. That." She laughed lightly, as if the very idea of me possessing valuable information amused her. "Naturally," Martin agreed, "but general impressions of company culture and leadership direction are always useful. What's your take on Harrison Reed as a leader? He's famously reclusive." The question caught me off guard. I hadn't anticipated discussing Reed personally, especially given my unique relationship with him that my family knew nothing about. "Mr. Reed has a remarkable vision for technological innovation," I replied carefully. He's highly engaged with the engineering teams and maintains exacting standards. You've met him then? Martin asked, surprise evident in his tone. My father looked equally startled. You didn't mention you'd actually met Reed himself. Yes, several times, I said, maintaining a casual tone despite the satisfaction I felt at their reactions. He's been directly involved with our current projects. My mother's expression shifted, reassessing the significance of my position. How extraordinary. We had no idea you were working at that level, Zara. The server arrived to take our orders, temporarily interrupting the conversation. When he departed, Martin immediately returned to the topic of Reed. There are rumors about his health, he said, lowering his voice slightly. The company has been unusually quiet about succession planning, which has some investors concerned. I kept my expression neutral, acutely conscious of Reed's confidence regarding his Parkinson's diagnosis. I couldn't comment on that, I replied, but Meridian has exceptional depth of leadership across all divisions. Martin nodded, receiving the diplomatic non-answer with the appreciation of someone who regularly navigated similar conversations. Of course, though Reed's vision has been central to their success. Brilliant engineer in his own right before becoming CEO. Indeed, I agreed, grateful for the shift from health speculation to professional assessment. The remainder of dinner progressed more smoothly, with conversation turning to Vanessa's pregnancy, my parents' recent vacation plans, and Martin's golf game. I participated appropriately while maintaining a slight emotional distance that I suspected was noticeable only to me. As dessert arrived, my father raised his glass. A toast to Zara's impressive new position. We always knew you were destined for success. The revision of history was so blatant that I nearly laughed. Instead, I smiled and accepted the toast with gracious thanks, choosing not to correct the convenient narrative he had constructed. Some battles weren't worth fighting, especially when I had already won the war they didn't even know had been waged. Will you be moving to a new apartment now? My mother asked as we finished our desserts. That neighborhood you're in isn't really appropriate for someone in your position. I'm exploring options, I replied truthfully. Just that morning, I had viewed 3 apartments in buildings I could never have considered on my previous income. There's a place near the river I'm particularly interested in. Sensible to upgrade your living situation, Martin approved. Appearances matter in corporate advancement. The right address, the right car, the right connections. He glanced meaningfully at my father. Richard mentioned you'll be completing your master's degree as well? Yes, at Westbrook Institute of Technology, I confirmed. The program starts in January. Prestigious school, Martin nodded. Derek considered their MBA program before choosing Wharton. How are you managing the tuition? Those programs don't come cheap. The direct question about finances would have been considered rude in many contexts, but Martin's position in my parents' social hierarchy gave him implicit permission for such inquiries. Before I could formulate a response, my father jumped in. Meridian is providing educational support as part of Zara's compensation package, quite generous of them. Some companies recognize the value of investing in talent, I said, unable to resist the subtle dig. They understand that supporting educational goals creates loyalty and enhances capabilities. If my father caught the implied criticism, he showed no sign. Always said you were smart as a whip, he commented, conveniently forgetting his dismissal of my academic ambitions 4 years earlier. Meridian clearly sees that too. As dinner concluded and we prepared to depart, Martin pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to me. I host a monthly dinner for young professionals in our extended circle, he said. Next one is in 2 weeks at my club. I'd like you to attend. Good networking opportunity. Several Meridian board members occasionally join us. I accepted the card, recognizing the invitation as significant within their social ecosystem. Thank you. I'll check my calendar. Outside the restaurant, my mother hugged me with unusual warmth. We're so proud of you, darling, she said. This is just the beginning for you. My father added his own embrace. Always knew you'd find your path. Sometimes the indirect route leads to better destinations. I smiled at this final rewriting of history, his convenient transformation of their obstruction into some kind of strategic guidance. "Thank you for dinner," I said simply. It was a lovely evening. As I walked to my rideshare, I reflected on the curious sensation of being celebrated by the very people who had created my greatest obstacle. Their pride now felt hollow, almost comical in its transparent self-interest. They were proud not of my resilience or determination, but of the status and connections my new position might bring to their social portfolio. I found I didn't resent them for this as I might have expected. Instead, I felt a cool detachment. They were who they had always been. The difference was that I now saw them clearly, without the desperate hope for approval that had clouded my vision for so long. My phone chimed with a text as I settled into the back seat of my ride. "Dr. Wei has scheduled a prototype review for Monday morning. I'd like you to present your revised cooling system architecture to the executive committee afterward. H. Reed." The message confirmed what the dinner had already crystallized for me. I was moving into a world where my parents' approval or disapproval had become irrelevant. Their social connections, once presented as essential pathways to opportunity, paled in comparison to the doors Harrison Reed had already opened. As my ride navigated through weekend traffic, I allowed myself a moment of pure, uncomplicated satisfaction. Not triumph over my family's limited vision, but appreciation for the path I had carved despite it. The journey had been unnecessarily difficult, marked by exhaustion and sacrifice that could have been avoided had my education been supported as promised. Yet I couldn't deny that those very struggles had shaped qualities Reed valued: persistence, resourcefulness, the ability to solve problems under constraint. Had my path been smoother, would I have developed the same tenacity? Would I have been cleaning that whiteboard at 3 a.m. when Reed arrived to find me solving his engineering challenge? The question was ultimately unanswerable and increasingly irrelevant. What mattered now was how I navigated the extraordinary opportunity before me, not just the engineering position or even the master's degree, but Reed's unprecedented offer of mentorship and possible succession. I thought again of his health disclosure, the vulnerability he had shown in sharing his diagnosis. That information created a complex dynamic between us, mentor and protege, certainly, but also a man facing physical decline and a woman he had identified as having the potential to continue his legacy. The responsibility inherent in that relationship felt both heavier and more meaningful than anything I had previously encountered. I was being offered not just career advancement, but the chance to shape the future of a company whose technologies affected millions of lives globally. My ride turned onto my street, still the same shabby neighborhood, though not for much longer. I made a decision. I would accept Reed's mentorship in its entirety, committing fully to the development program he had outlined. Not with blind allegiance, but with clear-eyed recognition of both the opportunity and the obligation it represented. Whatever had led me to this juncture, whether cruel twist of family priorities, my own stubborn determination, or simple cosmic coincidence, I was now positioned at the threshold of a future I had never anticipated but felt increasingly prepared to embrace. 3. Months passed in a transformative blur. My days fell into a demanding but exhilarating rhythm. Engineering work at Meridian's research campus from Monday through Thursday, graduate classes at WIT on Fridays and weekends, and twice-weekly mentorship sessions with Harrison Reed. By early April, I had settled into a spacious apartment in Riverside Towers, a sophisticated building overlooking the water with amenities I was still learning to navigate. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of the city skyline, particularly at sunset when the glass and steel structures caught the golden light. My sparse possessions from the old apartment looked almost comically out of place. In the expansive space, prompting a gradual acquisition of furniture that reflected my evolving aesthetic rather than mere necessity. The transition from night shift janitor to respected engineer had been surprisingly seamless at Meridian. Dr. Wei's initial reservation about my unorthodox background had transformed into genuine appreciation for my practical approach to engineering challenges. The cooling system I had designed was now implemented across 3 different robotics platforms, with performance metrics exceeding original projections. At WIT, I quickly established myself among the top students in the master's program, my years of self-directed study and practical application giving me advantages over classmates with more traditional backgrounds. Professors who might have viewed my community college credits with skepticism were won over by my demonstrated capabilities and Meridian's prestigious sponsorship. But it was the mentorship with Reed that was proving most transformative. True, to his word, he had structured a comprehensive development program that extended far beyond engineering principles. Our sessions alternated between his office at Meridian and various locations across the city, sometimes restaurants for dinner, discussions, other times walking meetings in parks or waterfronts where we could speak privately about sensitive company matters. Reed's teaching style was Socratic and exacting. He rarely provided direct answers to my questions, instead guiding me through analytical frameworks that revealed solutions through my own reasoning. He shared decades of accumulated wisdom about technological innovation, organizational dynamics, and strategic leadership, often through stories of Meridian's early challenges that had never been publicly documented. More surprisingly, he had begun introducing me to his network of influential connections, research partners, board members, key investors, and policymakers whose decisions shaped the regulatory environment for emerging technologies. These introductions were always carefully framed to emphasize my engineering expertise rather than our mentorship, but the mere fact of Reed's personal attention conveyed a status that others immediately registered. The weekly Sunday brunches with my family had evolved from obligation to a curious anthropological exercise. I observed with detached interest as my parents leveraged my new position at Meridian to enhance their social standing, noting how my association with Harrison Reed, which they mentioned at every opportunity despite knowing nothing of its true nature, had elevated their status among their peers. My sister Vanessa, now in the final weeks of her pregnancy, viewed my transformation with a mixture of genuine happiness and subtle competitive concern. Her life choices, the lavish wedding, the suburban home, the designer baby nursery, had always received unqualified family approval. My sudden professional success and financial independence introduced an unexpected alternate model of achievement. That subtly challenged the family hierarchy. "You look different," Vanessa observed during one such brunch as we sat slightly apart from our parents. "Not just the new clothes and haircut, there's something else." I smiled slightly. "Different circumstances change people, I suppose." "Are you happy?" she asked with unexpected directness. "With all of it, the job, the school, the new apartment?" The question gave me pause. Happiness hadn't been my primary goal during the years of working night shifts and saving every penny. Determination, resilience, progress toward clearly defined objectives. These had been my focus, with happiness deferred to some unspecified future date. "I'm engaged," I finally answered, intellectually challenged, building something meaningful. "That's not exactly what I asked," Vanessa noted shrewdly. I considered more carefully. "I'm satisfied. The work is significant. The recognition is validating. But happiness seems like a simpler state than what I'm experiencing." "You always were complicated," she said, but without judgment. "Even as kids, I wanted the straightforward things, the beautiful wedding, the perfect house, the healthy baby. You wanted something less definable," I finished when she trailed off. "Still do, I suppose." Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of our father, his expression unusually serious. "Zara, I need to speak with you privately after brunch." Is everything all right? I asked, immediately alert to his tone. Nothing to worry about, he assured me. Just a matter I'd prefer to discuss one-on-one. Throughout the remainder of the meal, I noticed him checking his watch repeatedly, a nervous energy evident in his normally confident demeanor. As brunch concluded, he suggested we take a walk along the restaurant's adjacent garden path. Once we were beyond earshot of the family, he turned to me with uncharacteristic hesitancy. I've been meaning to have a conversation with you for some time now, Zara. About the past, specifically about your college fund. The directness of his introduction surprised me. In the months since my professional transformation, my parents had carefully avoided any mention of the redirected educational funds, preferring to maintain the fiction that my current success was somehow aligned with their long-term expectations for me. What about it? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He cleared his throat. I've been doing some calculations. The amount that was reallocated to Vanessa's wedding. With compound interest over these 4 years, it would have grown to approximately $110,000. I raised an eyebrow, wondering where this unexpected accounting exercise was leading. Your mother and I have been discussing this, he continued. With your new position and educational opportunity, it seems appropriate to make things right. From his suit jacket, he removed an envelope and handed it to me. This is a cashier's check for $110,000. It represents the full value of what would have been your education fund had it remained intact. I stared at the envelope without taking it, momentarily speechless. After 4 years of working night shifts, after the struggle and exhaustion and sacrifice, my father was suddenly offering restitution, now that I no longer needed it. Why now? I asked quietly. He shifted uncomfortably. Your success at Meridian has made us rethink our earlier decisions. Perhaps we were hasty in prioritizing as we did. The careful phrasing struck me as revealing. Not wrong, but hasty. Not an acknowledgement of harm caused, but a reassessment of strategic allocation based on new information, specifically, my unexpected professional advancement. I appreciate the gesture, I said carefully, still not reaching for the envelope. But I'm curious about its timing. 3 months ago, I was working as a janitor and taking online classes. You offered no restitution then. My father flushed slightly. That's not entirely fair, Zara. We didn't fully understand your circumstances. Because you never asked, I pointed out, my tone factual rather than accusatory. In 4 years, neither you nor Mom ever questioned why I always worked nights, why I lived in that particular neighborhood, why I never took vacations. He had no immediate response to this, his expression shifting between defensiveness and genuine discomfort. The reallocation of my college fund wasn't simply a financial decision, I continued. It was a statement about whose dreams your family prioritized. Vanessa's wedding was deemed essential. My education was considered optional. That wasn't our intention, he protested. We always believed in your capabilities. Perhaps. But belief without support is merely sentiment, Dad, and sentiment doesn't pay tuition. I finally took the envelope, not because I needed or particularly wanted the money, but because refusing it would create a different kind of complication in our relationship. Thank you for this. It represents a significant acknowledgement. Relief washed over his features. We want things to be right between us, Zara. Your mother and I are tremendously proud of what you've accomplished. The statement hung in the air, its implicit revision of history almost palpable. My accomplishments had occurred not because of their support, but despite its absence. Their pride now felt not just unearned, but almost intrusive, a retroactive claiming of participation in a journey they had actively complicated. I should get going, I said, checking my watch. I have a meeting with Harrison this afternoon. My deliberate use of Reed's first name registered visibly with my father. You work closely with him, don't you? More than you've mentioned. I nodded without elaboration. He's been an important guide in my transition at Meridian. We rejoined the family, and I made my goodbyes, promising to attend a small gathering. They were planning for when Vanessa returned from the hospital with her baby. As I departed, I felt my father watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Pride mixed with something that might have been regret, or perhaps simply recalculation. 2 hours later, I sat in Harrison Reed's home office, the envelope, containing my father's check placed on the desk between us. I had just finished recounting the morning's interaction, including my father's sudden offer of restitution. Reed listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When I concluded, he leaned back in his chair, regarding me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to evaluate not just my words, but the underlying emotional architecture. "What will you do with it?" he asked finally, nodding toward the envelope. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I don't need it for its intended purpose anymore. The timing feels convenient." "Elaborate on convenient," Reed prompted in his typical Socratic fashion. "The repayment comes after I've already secured my education, through other means. After I've attained a position that reflects well on them socially. After I've established a connection to you, which they find impressive though they don't understand its nature." I paused, organizing my thoughts. It feels less like making amends and more like an investment in maintaining access to what I now represent. Reed nodded, a slight smile indicating approval of my analysis. "In business, I've observed that people often attempt to renegotiate relationships once power dynamics shift. Your parents supported your sister when she represented their primary social asset. Now that your position has created new value, they're attempting to strengthen their claim on that relationship." Put so bluntly, the assessment felt harsh, but accurate. "Should I have refused the money?" "That would depend on your objectives," Reed replied. Refusing might have provided emotional satisfaction, but would create ongoing friction. Accepting without comment, as you did, leaves you with both the resources and the upper hand in the relationship. He studied me for a moment. "The question now is what this repayment means to you symbolically, and how you choose to deploy those resources in alignment with your values." I considered this carefully. Symbolically, it represents an acknowledgement of the obstacle they created. However, reluctant or self-interested that acknowledgement might be. As for deployment, an idea began forming, connecting to conversations Reed and I had been having about educational access and technological innovation. The Meridian Foundation funds STEM education initiatives, doesn't it? Reed nodded. Various programs, primarily focused on providing technology resources to underserved schools. What about scholarships for students whose circumstances echo mine? Individuals with demonstrated aptitude but limited financial resources, particularly those from backgrounds underrepresented in engineering fields? His expression warmed with appreciation. An elegant solution, using funds that originally represented educational limitation to instead create educational opportunity for others. Would the foundation have a mechanism for establishing such a targeted scholarship? I asked. Indeed, Reed confirmed. We could structure it as a named fund with specific selection criteria. He paused, studying me. Would you want it to bear your name? I considered, then shook my head. That would defeat the purpose of transforming this specific money into something entirely new. Perhaps we could name it for my grandparents who established the original fund with genuine educational intent. The Morrison Engineering Scholarship, Reed suggested, recalling my maternal grandparents' surname from previous conversations. Yes, I agreed, feeling a sense of rightness about the decision. With preference given to students who have demonstrated unusual persistence in pursuing their educational goals despite obstacles. Reed made a note in his tablet. I'll have the foundation team draft the necessary paperwork. Your $110,000 could support approximately 5 substantial scholarships with the foundation's matching program. As we turned to other matters, specifically preparation for an upcoming board presentation where I would be presenting the expanded applications of my cooling system technology. I felt a peculiar sense of closure. My father's check, representing what had once been the central obstacle in my path, was now transformed into an opportunity for others facing similar challenges. Later that evening, as I stood at my apartment window watching lights shimmer across the water, my phone buzzed with a text from Harrison Reed. The foundation director is enthusiastic about the Morrison Engineering Scholarship. Documentation. We'll be ready for your review tomorrow. Your capacity to transform setback into opportunity continues to impress. HRI smiled, recognizing in his message the quality he had identified in me from the beginning. Not just intelligence or technical skill, but the ability to reconfigure obstacles into advantages. It was this capacity, more than my engineering solution or academic credentials, that had drawn his attention that night at the whiteboard. As I prepared for bed, I realized that Vanessa's question from brunch remained with me. Was I happy? The B answer was still complex, but increasingly clear. I had moved beyond the narrow pursuit of recovering what had been taken from me into something more expansive, building a future that would have been impossible to imagine when I first began, working night shifts at Meridian Technologies. Happiness seemed too simple a word for that evolution. What I felt instead was a profound sense of alignment, with my capabilities, with meaningful work, and with the emerging understanding that my greatest contributions might lie not in engineering alone, but in the intersection of technical innovation and human potential that Harrison Reed was helping me explore. 18 months after Harrison Reed discovered me solving equations on his whiteboard, I stood beside him on the gleaming stage of Meridian Technologies' annual Innovation Summit. The auditorium was filled with hundreds of the company's top engineers, executives, investors, and press representatives, all gathered to witness the unveiling of our groundbreaking thermal regulation system. What began as a midnight encounter with an extraordinary mind has evolved into Meridian's most significant technological advancement in a decade, Reed was saying, his voice steady and commanding despite the subtle tremor in his left hand that had become more noticeable in recent months. The microflow thermal regulation system represents not merely an incremental improvement, but a fundamental reimagining of how robotics platforms manage heat distribution. On the massive screen behind us, technical specifications and performance metrics scrolled in elegant animations, highlighting the 42% efficiency improvement and 27% power reduction our system delivered compared to previous technologies. The room hummed with the particular energy that technologists generate when confronted with genuine innovation, a mixture of professional appreciation and competitive assessment. Rather than telling you about this breakthrough, Reed continued, I'll introduce its primary architect. 2 years ago, Zara Winters was working night shifts at Meridian while pursuing her engineering education. Today, she leads our thermal innovation division and holds 7 patents related to the technology. You're about to witness, Dr. Winters, the stage is yours. The formal title still felt new, though I had completed my doctorate at WIT 3 months earlier, accelerating through the program with a dissertation on thermal regulation applications that had already been implemented in Meridian's production systems. Reed's mentorship program had evolved to include sponsorship of my accelerated academic track, arranging for my practical work at Meridian to satisfy key research requirements. I stepped forward, conscious of the contrast between this moment and where I had stood just 2 years earlier. Gone was the exhausted janitor in a gray uniform. In her place stood a polished executive in a tailored suit, directing a team of 30 engineers and commanding respect throughout the organization. Thank you, Mr. Reed, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sophisticated acoustic space. The microflow system originated from a fundamental question. Why do we treat heat as an enemy to be defeated rather than a resource to be harnessed? For the next 20 minutes, I guided the audience through the technical architecture of our system, explaining how it redistributed thermal energy through microscale fluid channels to power supplementary functions, while improving overall platform performance. The presentation culminated in a dramatic demonstration as our latest humanoid robot performed complex manipulation tasks that would have caused previous generations to overheat within minutes. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Technical, audiences are often reserved, but genuine innovation tends to break through professional detachment. I caught Reed's eye as we acknowledged the response, his slight nod conveying the particular approval that had become increasingly meaningful to me. The remainder of the summit passed in a blur of panels, networking sessions, and technical breakout discussions. I moved through these events with a confidence that had solidified over months of similar engagements, no longer feeling like an imposter in executive settings, but recognizing my earned place among Meridian's leadership. Late that evening, as the summit concluded with a reception for key stakeholders, I found myself in conversation with Elise Chen and Victoria Hargrove near the renovated atrium fountain. The board was extremely impressed with today's presentation, Victoria noted, her usually reserved demeanor warming slightly. The commercialization projections for microflow are exceptionally strong. Thank you, I acknowledged. The team has worked incredibly hard to move from concept to implementation in such a compressed timeline. Harrison seems pleased, Elise observed, glancing across the room where Reed was engaged in conversation with several board members. Though he's more fatigued than he'll admit. Her comment acknowledged what the three of us understood but rarely discussed directly. Reed's condition was progressing, the symptoms becoming more difficult to manage despite aggressive treatment. The subtle tremors had expanded to occasional balance issues, and his legendary stamina had diminished, though his intellectual acuity remained undiminished. He's pushed himself too hard preparing for this summit, Victoria agreed. The succession planning discussions have been particularly draining. I maintained a neutral expression despite the jolt of awareness her words triggered. In our private mentorship sessions, Reed had increasingly focused on preparing me for expanded leadership responsibilities, but formal succession planning had not been explicitly discussed between us. The board meeting next week will address several significant transitions, Victoria continued, watching me carefully. I believe you'll be invited to attend the closed session. Before I could formulate a response to this unexpected information, a familiar voice interrupted our conversation. Ladies, I hope I'm not intruding. Martin Calloway approached our group, champagne flute in hand, his expression conveying the particular satisfaction of someone who believes they belong in the most exclusive circles. Mr. Calloway, I greeted him with professional courtesy. I wasn't aware you were attending the summit. Last-minute invitation through a board connection, he explained, clearly pleased to demonstrate his access. Extraordinary presentation, Zara. Your parents must be tremendously proud. The mention of my family created a curious disconnect, as it always did in professional settings. My parents had indeed embraced their role as parents of a rising corporate executive, attending Meridian's public events when possible, and liberally dropping references to my association with Harrison Reed in their social circles. They're supportive, I replied diplomatically, though the technical details remain somewhat mysterious to them. Martin chuckled, as they do to most of us non-engineers, but results speak for themselves, and from what I gather, your system has significant implications for Meridian's market position. Victoria excused herself to join another conversation, while Elise received a message on her tablet that prompted her immediate attention. Within moments, I found myself alone with Martin, who moved closer with conspiratorial familiarity. Between us, he said, lowering his voice, there's considerable speculation about Reed's health and Meridian's leadership transition. Your prominence at today's event hasn't gone unnoticed. I maintained my composed expression. Mr. Reed's health is a private matter, and Meridian has robust leadership across all divisions. Of course, Martin nodded. But the special relationship between you and Reed has become something of an open secret. My sources suggest you're being groomed for a significant executive role, possibly even CEO track. The accuracy of his information was unsettling, though I revealed nothing. Meridian values developing talent throughout the organization. I'm fortunate to have opportunities to contribute at multiple levels. Martin smiled knowingly. Diplomatically stated, "Your transformation has been remarkable, Zara. From entry-level position to Reed's protege in less than 2 years. One might almost call it miraculous." Something in his tone triggered warning signals. Hard work and technical innovation tend to be recognized at Meridian, I replied carefully. Meritocracy is a core value. Indeed. Though connections never hurt. He sipped his champagne. Which reminds me, your family mentioned you'll be joining us for Thanksgiving this year. We're delighted you can finally fit us into your schedule. The subtle dig at my frequent absences from family gatherings didn't escape me. Looking forward to it, I said with professional pleasantness that revealed nothing of my actual feelings about the obligation. Across the room, I noticed Elise attempting to catch my attention with a discreet gesture. If you'll excuse me, Mr. Calloway, I'm needed elsewhere. Enjoy the remainder of the reception. I navigated through the crowd toward Elise, who met me, halfway. Harrison has asked to see you in his office, she said quietly. He's already left the reception. Concern immediately surfaced. Reed rarely departed from official functions early, particularly signature events like the Innovation Summit. Is everything all right? He didn't specify, Elise replied, but he seemed determined about something. I made my way to the executive elevator bank, my mind cycling through possibilities. Had Reed's health taken a sudden downturn? Was there an emerging crisis with the microflow system? Or was this related to Victoria's mention of succession planning? Reed's office occupied the entire northeast corner of Meridian's top floor, with views spanning the city and riverfront. When I entered, I found him standing at the window, silhouetted against the night skyline, his posture revealing more fatigue than he typically allowed others to observe. You wanted to see me? I asked quietly. He turned, and I was struck by the intensity in his expression. Not illness or exhaustion, but a focused resolve I had come to recognize as preceding significant decisions. The presentation was exceptional, he said. The market response is already substantial. 3 major manufacturing partners have requested immediate licensing discussions. That's excellent news, I acknowledged, still uncertain about the urgency of this private meeting. Reed moved to his desk, retrieving a tablet and handing it to me. These are the board materials for next Thursday's meeting. I want you to review them tonight, particularly the governance committee recommendations beginning on page 42. I accepted the tablet, my confusion growing. Board materials were strictly confidential, typically restricted to directors and the most senior executives until formal decisions had been announced. Harrison, what's happening? I asked directly. He gestured for me to sit, taking his own chair with the deliberate care that had become necessary as his condition progressed. I've accelerated certain aspects of our planning timeline, he said. My medical team has recommended reducing my operational responsibilities more quickly than we had originally anticipated. The implication was clear, but still shocking. How quickly? The board will vote next week on a structured transition plan. I'll remain as executive chairman focused on strategic direction, but the CEO position will be separated and filled by the end of the quarter. My heartbeat quickened. And you're showing me these materials because you're being recommended for the position, he stated simply. Not as interim or acting CEO, but as my permanent successor. The words seemed to hang in the air, between us. Momentarily surreal despite the months of preparation that I now recognized had been leading to this moment. The board has questions, naturally, Reed continued, watching me process this information. Your relative youth, your compressed executive experience. Some have suggested we should conduct an external search while appointing Victoria as interim CEO. That would be the conventional approach, I acknowledged, my analytical mind already assessing the organizational dynamics such a transition would create. Conventional, yes, but I didn't build Meridian by following convention. Reed leaned forward slightly. I've spent the past 18 months preparing you not just for technical leadership, but for this specific role. The governance committee has reviewed your performance data, your strategic contributions, and the cultural alignment you've demonstrated throughout the organization. He gestured to the tablet. The vote won't be unanimous, transitions at this level rarely are, but the recommendation carries my full support and that of the key committee chairs. I took a deep breath, centering myself before responding. I'm honored by the recommendation, but I have to ask, is this timing truly best for Meridian? My experience at executive levels is limited compared to traditional CEO candidates. Reed's expression softened slightly. The question itself demonstrates why you're the right choice. You're considering the organization's needs above personal advancement. He paused. To answer directly, yes, this accelerated timeline creates certain risks, but delaying creates others, particularly related to market perception and strategic continuity. He rose, moving with careful deliberation to a cabinet from which he retrieved a small wooden box. When I founded Meridian Technologies, I carried every prototype component in this box, he said, placing it on the desk between us. It represented possibility, the potential to build something transformative if I could find the right collaborators and opportunities. He opened the box to reveal what appeared to be the original circuit boards and mechanical elements from Meridian's first commercial product. For 30 years, I've been the primary steward of what grew from these humble components. The board, members change, executives come and go, but the fundamental vision has remained consistent. Using technological innovation to solve meaningful human problems. His gaze met mine directly. That vision needs a new steward, Zara. Someone who understands both the technical foundations and the human implications of our work. Someone whose personal journey demonstrates the capacity to overcome obstacles through innovation rather than force. The significance of the moment settled over me. This wasn't merely a professional opportunity, but a profound expression of trust from the person who had transformed my life through his recognition of potential. Others had dismissed. I won't pretend this transition will be simple, Reed continued. There will be resistance, both internal and external. Your age, your meteoric rise, your gender in an industry still dominated by men, all will be scrutinized. But these supposed liabilities are precisely why you bring necessary perspective to the role. He closed the box carefully. Review the materials tonight. We'll discuss your questions tomorrow morning. The board presentation is scheduled for 2 p.m. on Thursday. As I left Reed's office, the weight of the tablet in my hand seemed disproportionate to its physical size, a concentrated symbol of the responsibility being offered. In just 18 months, I had progressed from cleaning these executive offices during night shifts to potentially leading the entire organization from them. The symmetry was both poetic and sobering, a reminder of how dramatically circumstances could change through the catalyst of a single encounter with someone who recognized value others had overlooked. The morning of Thanksgiving arrived with unseasonable warmth, golden light filtering through the windows of my penthouse apartment. In the 2 months since the board had confirmed my appointment as Meridian Technologies CEO, I had finally purchased a permanent residence, a sleek, modern space atop one of the city's most prestigious buildings. The views stretched across the river to the gleaming research campus where I had once pushed a cleaning cart through darkened hallways. I stood at the window, coffee in hand, contemplating the day ahead. The formal announcement of my appointment had generated precisely the media firestorm Harrison had predicted. Equal parts fascination with my rapid ascent, scrutiny of my qualifications, and speculation about Reed's health. Business publications had run profiles with headlines like From Night Shift to Corner Office and Meridian's Surprising Succession Choice, though none had discovered the full story of my janitorial past. My phone chimed with a message from Harrison, the board chair. Called to express how impressed he was with yesterday's strategic review. You've settled any remaining doubts. Enjoy your family obligation today. You've earned the break. I smiled at his phrasing. Harrison was well aware of my complicated feelings about the Thanksgiving gathering at my parents' home, particularly with the additional stress of the Callaways joining as guests. What had once been a simple family dinner had evolved into an elaborate networking opportunity now that my position offered social currency. The drive to my parents' suburban neighborhood took 40 minutes, a route I now traveled in a sleek electric vehicle rather than by public transportation. As I pulled into their driveway, I noted several luxury cars already parked outside, including Martin Callaway's distinctive imported sedan. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her expression a mixture of genuine happiness and social performance. Zara, finally, our CEO has arrived. She embraced me with the careful enthusiasm of someone mindful of wrinkling expensive clothing, mine or hers. The interior of the house had been transformed for the occasion. Professional floral arrangements dominated every surface, catering. Staff moved efficiently through the space, and a photographer discreetly captured candid family moments. This theatrical production stood in stark contrast to the modest Thanksgiving gatherings of my childhood. Everyone's in the living room, my mother said, guiding me through the house as though I might have forgotten its layout. Martin has been telling the most fascinating stories about his board connections. The living room tableau was precisely, as expected, my father presiding over the bar, Vanessa cradling her 7-month-old son while her husband Derek engaged with his father, and several family friends strategically invited for their social connections. Conversations paused as I entered, attention shifting noticeably. "Here she is," my father announced, moving to greet me with uncharacteristic effusiveness. Meridian's newest chief executive. The next hour passed in a parade of congratulations, questions about Meridian's stock prospects, and not-so-subtle attempts to leverage my position for various advantages. Martin Callaway was particularly persistent, alternating between collegial familiarity and thinly disguised attempts to extract insider information about Meridian's upcoming product announcements. As dinner approached, I found a moment of respite. In the kitchen, ostensibly checking on meal preparations but actually seeking a brief escape from the performative interactions. Vanessa joined me, her sleeping baby nestled against her shoulder. "It's quite the production out there," she observed quietly. "Mom's been planning this for weeks. The guest list changed daily based on who might be most advantageous for the family. To connect with the new CEO of Meridian Technologies." Her tone held no malice, merely factual observation. Our relationship had evolved into something more honest since my professional transformation, the competitive dynamic giving way to a more balanced mutual respect. "I've noticed," I replied, watching the catering staff arrange elegant place settings. "This isn't exactly the Thanksgiving tradition I remember." Vanessa shifted her son to her other shoulder. "Do you remember that Thanksgiving right after you started working at Meridian? When Mom served boxed stuffing and Dad fell asleep watching football before dessert?" The memory surfaced unexpectedly. A simple family gathering before my sister's wedding, before the college fund was redirected, before everything changed. I had been a college senior then, still believing my path to engineering would be straightforward and supported. "Things change," I said simply. "Some things," Vanessa agreed. "Others remain remarkably consistent." She nodded toward the living room, where our parents were prominently displaying family photos to the guests, carefully curated images that presented a narrative of unbroken family cohesion and support. "They've completely revised history, you know. In their version, they always believed in your potential, always supported your dreams." "I've noticed that too," I acknowledged. Vanessa's expression turned serious. I never properly apologized for my role in all of it. The wedding, the money. I didn't know they had taken your college fund until much later. But I should have asked. Questions. The apology was unexpected but felt genuine. It worked out in the end, I said, though not in any way we could have anticipated. More than worked out, she observed. If things had gone according to the original plan, you'd be a mid-level engineer somewhere, not running a global technology company at 30. Her assessment was accurate, though simplified. The obstacles my parents had created had indeed forced me onto a path that ultimately led to greater success, but not without years of exhaustion and sacrifice that remained invisible in the triumphant narrative now being celebrated. Dinner proceeded with the orchestrated precision of a corporate event rather than a family gathering. My father offered an elaborate toast to my success, constructing a revisionist history in which my achievements represented the culmination of the family's collective vision rather than my solitary persistence in the face of their obstruction. As dessert was served, Martin Calloway directed the conversation toward Harrison Reed. "Such a remarkable mentor relationship you've developed," he observed with practiced casualness. "The board must have tremendous confidence in his judgment to appoint someone with your unconventional background as his successor." The subtle emphasis suggested he knew more than he had explicitly stated. I maintained my professional composure, well practiced from managing similar probes from financial analysts and journalists. "Meridian values innovation at all levels," I replied, "including leadership development." "Indeed," Martin continued, "though I understand you had a rather unique entry point to the company. Something about solving an engineering problem after hours?" My father leaned forward with interest. "You've never shared that story, Zara. How did you first connect with Reed?" The moment crystallized a decision I had been contemplating since receiving the CEO appointment. How much of my true journey to share and with whom? The sanitized version had served its purpose during the transition, but perhaps the authentic story held value that extended beyond my personal experience. "It's actually quite an interesting story," I began, setting down my dessert fork. "I was working as a night janitor at Meridian headquarters while taking engineering classes during the day." The stunned silence around the table was immediate and profound. My mother's social smile froze, while my father's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "A janitor?" he finally managed. "But you told us you had an entry-level position in their technology division." "The cleaning service was my entry point," I clarified. "For 4 years, I worked night shifts cleaning offices, including Harrison Reed's, while saving money to rebuild the college fund that had been redirected to Vanessa's wedding." The mention of the redirected funds created another wave of uncomfortable silence. My parents exchanged alarmed glances, clearly distressed by this public reference to a decision they had carefully omitted from their revised family narrative. One night, Harrison found me solving an engineering equation on his whiteboard, I continued, addressing the entire table but watching my parents' reactions. That moment changed everything. But it wouldn't have happened without the 4 years of night shifts that preceded it. As I concluded the abbreviated but honest version of my journey, I recognized that sharing this truth served a purpose beyond mere disclosure. It reclaimed my narrative from those who would reshape it to serve their own needs, anchoring my success in the reality of persistence rather than the fiction of seamless support. In the stunned silence that followed, I glimpsed the future of my family relationships with new clarity, not severed, but fundamentally recalibrated around an honesty that had been missing for too long. The truth, once spoken, could never be unheard. And in that irreversibility lay a different kind of freedom than the financial independence Harrison Reed's mentorship had provided, the freedom to own my story completely, both its struggles and its triumphs. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.